Hello, Tourpreneurs, and welcome back to another episode of the Tourpreneur Travel Business Podcast. We are really excited today to be diving into the world of online marketplaces with Tao Tao. Tao Tao is the COO, but more importantly, the co-founder of Get Your Guide, one of the world's largest marketplaces for experiences. And Tao Tao, a huge welcome to Tourpreneur. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Mitch, for having me.
So the reason for our conversation today is you've released your numbers, your by the numbers report. And when we took a look at the numbers are pretty astounding. Since you opened, 200 million tickets sold, 35,000 supply partners, 150,000 experiences available, 12,000 cities, 37 currencies, 37 languages. Those are some big numbers. And I know it hasn't been easy. And so we're wondering sort of what has kind of surprised you about this journey of trying to build a marketplace in this weird experiences industry that we all love.
I think maybe starting from the surprises from the external market, so things that were surprising to the others, is I don't think anybody would have expected that we could actually pull this off. And, I take you back maybe 15 or 14 years ago, and I remember this vividly when we were at the World Travel Mart, which is one of these, conferences for tourism in general. And there was a startup panel, and somebody from the from Priceline back then, now Booking Holdings, a senior executive, was in the panel, and he listened to our pitch. My co-founder Johannes was pitching, and then afterwards, I think his feedback was, love your energy. This is never going to work. So I think certainly the notion back then was that the space is too fragmented, it is too multi-category, it is too local, and it's just never going to work. So I think in a way, we've probably surprised the travel industry by not only making this work, but also by probably making this the most relevant travel category for the next decade to come. So I think that's definitely been one of the probably surprises for the industry. In terms of surprises for us, the way I look at it, there's always a ton of learnings, things that you think might go one way, go the other way. We'll talk about, our strategy modification when it comes to curation a bit later on in the podcast, I'm sure. But, there's always these things that happen. I think the question is just like, how quickly can you react to it? And maybe and last but not least, I think probably the biggest unexpected event was certainly COVID, right? So that was, I think, for the entire industry, something that nobody expected, and we just all had to deal with.
When you think about all of these types of experiences that you have on your marketplace, what are the categories that are the big sellers? What's popular? 200 million tickets sold. What are the big hitters?
Yeah, Mitch, so you're already hinting at the fact that the marketplace is very multi-category. So, you don't just have one type of inventory like in hotels, where it's just, different types of hotels or different beds in concrete, essentially. So the biggest categories for us is definitely the tours category overall. That said, within tours, I think, it's worth to break it down by day trips, by walking tours. You have, certainly the more on the adventure tour side of things, adrenaline activities. And then you start to go into, which is also quite a big category, which is anything on water. So water activities is quite big, especially the river cruises. In fact, I would say river cruises or city cruises was the big COVID winner. So, before that, it was more in the single digits. Now it's actually in the double digits of share. It's just a very, very popular product. And then last but not least, a very big category for us is attraction tickets. So this could be tickets to a theme park, a ticket to observatory tower, a museum. And then also we're seeing some high growth in shows and events as well. So I would say those are some of the major categories. The fastest growth, I would say, is actually in the more longer tail of our inventory. So in the workshops and classes that particularly appeal to the independent traveler that's looking for slightly more niche experiences. So we've seen the fastest growth over the last couple of years.
Tao Tao, I wanted to chat a little bit about the trend tracker that you released. I think it was back in September, which was incredible. It contained a massive amount and a wealth of data, to be honest. But with that trend tracker, what were some of the changes you've seen over the last few years with like customer behavior, especially since, as you mentioned there, the pandemic and COVID? What has changed in terms of how people are buying experiences?
I think a couple of changes. One of them is definitely macro. So I think probably the one piece of data that was picked up the most from the trend tracker is really the general growth in the spending on experiences. And us being in experiences, I think it's always we kind of know this. But the fact that general macro spending on experiences has grown by something like 32% compared to pre-pandemic, versus only like a very low single-digit growth in buying things. So, whenever we talk about why are we growing so fast? Why is the industry growing so fast? That's just a macro trend, right? People are just spending more money on experiences. I think that's definitely one. The other one, I would say, is in the I think just general online adoption, right? So online is growing much faster than offline, and then OTAs is also outpacing the general online growth, which means that OTAs, like Get Your Guide, are becoming destinations for discovery, for experience, for customers. So I would say those are probably the biggest ones, and then there are a couple of sub trends. The one that we, especially in our brand work, hone in a lot is that you're starting to develop a subsegment of customers, and we call them the modern explorers, that really overspend on experiences. They're you can call them experience obsessed. You can call them just big fans of experiences. And so it's definitely not that everybody's doing a bit more, but you have a not small group, right? This is a significant part of the travel experience market that are just spending a lot on experiences. And I myself is certainly one of them, not just because of Get Your Guide working here, but just generally, I start so many of my trip planning with what experiences are available. So, recently we had, a weekend to spend. I was, seeing that we had some interesting experiences in the north of Norway. Great, there are experiences available. Now I can look into flights. So I think we're starting to see that behavior shift. And if I could make a prediction about the next 10 years, is that we will see much more of that. One of my favorite saying is that the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. I think some of the behavior we're already seeing on our marketplace, which is, I start with a search of experiences and then I plan my, you could call it logistics, right? How to get there and where to sleep, basically around the experiences. I think we'll see much more of that over the next decade.
Yeah, there's a tension here that I noticed in the tracker that you're saying that the customer is going to OTAs and in general looking to experiences as a driver towards a destination. And yet our operators are constantly talking about the narrowing booking window. They're booking later and later and later. So how do you square those two behaviors, the late bookings and the early searchings?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of that is, one of, and I go back to one of my earlier things, how traditional hospitality folks used to think about travel, which is it's one funnel, right? I start my flight, then I do my hotel, then I do my experiences, and then whatever, right? And so, and that is just fundamentally not true. I think there's both the consideration track, like how you think about where to go, and then what do you book when. So what we see a lot is, customers come to Get Your Guide, browse, then don't book, or maybe book one activity and then book the rest when they're in destination, right? And then in between, they book the flight and the hotel. So I think what you see a lot is it is not one, sequential funnel of travel planning and booking, but that people, use experiences to help them inspire where to go. Then maybe they book their flights. Maybe they book this one ticket that is likely to sell out. Like if you go to, Rome, you're very likely to book your, Vatican tour up front. But then you have saved a few things on your wish list. You won't be able to do all of them, and then you book some of those things last minute because depending on mood, depending if you're hungover, depending on if your wife is into cooking classes and so on. So and then you make some last minute decisions as well. So I think it's just all merging into this, not one discrete funnel, but just this mash of decision making.
Is it fair to then offer as sort of a piece of advice to the suppliers out there to be thinking about developing those kinds of marquee experiences that feel much more like an anchor in a trip that they want to secure early?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's probably hard to create a marquee experience from scratch. So certainly, if you're an operator, of the Vatican museums. You have a Marquee product right there. I do think that you're hitting on an important point, which is to think much more about the IP of the experience, or the core of the experience, right? So, very often also coming from the hotel world, people obsess over prices, availability, all these things, which are important. But at the core of experiences is really the thing that you actually do. And one of the things that we always say internally, and that I also try to tell the operators out there, is the most popular experience is probably still yet to be created. And recently, when we went to Japan we had a local operator event, and it was super super inspiring, because half of the people in that room, the young entrepreneurs, were not even in the business pre-pandemic. Now, to be fair, if you're probably familiar with Japan, which had a very long travel lockdown, and so travel basically didn't exist for almost 3 years. And so a lot of folks went out of business, but very encouragingly, a lot of people went into business. So you had a lot of these super young entrepreneurs creating experiences that was, as an entrepreneur myself, super, super inspiring. And more importantly, not only do they create new experiences, some of them were hits. So one of my favorite experiences, and I'm going to Japan in February with my wife, is so when you have these sumo wrestlers and they retire, a lot of them open restaurants, and it's called a chankenabe experience. And actually, one of our bestsellers in Tokyo now is a newly created chankenabe, which is essentially a version of a chicken hot pot, which is an absolute bestseller, right? So this thing did not exist pre-pandemic. It's somebody who created this experience from scratch. Now it's a bestseller. So long story short, I would encourage operators to think about new innovative ways of what to experience as a way to compete, rather than only obsessing over price and availability. Now, those things are important. And of course, just a last thought on this, the risk of creating a new type of experience is that it won't work, right? So it's possible that, I come up with a great idea, or you create Mitch's calligraphy class in Dumbo, right? And maybe nobody books it because people just think it's not interesting, or maybe it works. So there is an entrepreneurial risk attached to it, but that's also where the rewards can be, especially in the new experience era, where people don't just look for this one thing to do in New York, this one thing to do in Rome, but they're looking for the specific thing that really aligns with their passions.
Tao Tao, all marketplaces have this difficult balance to manage. On one side, you've got the customers, the travelers. The other side, you've got the suppliers. And invariably, the travelers have to come first, because they're the people paying the money. So the travelers are always going to take a little bit more weight than the supply. What are you seeing, that you're always building new tools for both the supply side and the travelers? What are you seeing as the reasons that travelers book with you as a marketplace above booking elsewhere?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are so many ways to answer it, and peel the onion, because I think you're hitting on one of the key points of running a marketplace. Maybe starting with why do people book with us? There are fundamentally two points of differentiation that we think we can credibly deliver. One is discovery. So if you have the question of what can I do in New York City, what can I do in Berlin, we hope that we are the destination, and we're working very hard that we can best answer this question for you, which means we have the most comprehensive selection of relevant activities for the travelers, and that we have a great, search, comparison, and visual interface that helps you then narrow down on what you want to book. So discovery is one. And so that when you've booked with us in Rome, next time you go to, I don't know, Mallorca, or I don't know, Paris, that you think, well, GetYourGuide really helped me to find things that, partially that I knew existed, partially I didn't know, and I was inspired and actually really matched my passions, that I'm going to use them again, because they can help me find things that really, make me happy. So that's one. And the other part is trust. So the big difference between, I think somebody like us selling experiences versus, some e-commerce selling products or even hotel platforms, is that our job does not end at the booking, but our job ends after the activity is over. As you know very well, in services, the bar just needs to be much higher in what you deliver, because people spend time. We're dealing in all kinds of type of experiences, so we take that trust point very seriously. Small example: I cannot find my meeting point, right? Does the QR code work when I try to enter the attraction? Maybe the quality was bad. So there's so many things that we have to make sure go right. And that's why we have customer service and all these kind of things. So I would say those are the two areas that matter the most: discovery and trust.
So from that, it looks like you're trying to obviously create a uniform customer experience that the customer will experience time and time and time again. If we then jump into the supplier side, because we have this massive fragmented industry, how do you square that with the supply side? Whereas one supplier will be able to give you a cut-off date of X, could be 4 hours, could be 12 hours. Other suppliers, just because of their operations, can't do any better than 24 or 48. Some can handle cancellations up until right before the trip. Some can't handle cancellation. So you're trying to create a uniform experience, but your supply side is anything but uniform.
Yeah, that's a great question. A couple of thoughts. One is there's ultimately a balance to be struck. So we cannot be everything goes. This was the early days of Get Your Guide, where we say, hey, everything goes, we let you configure anything. Nor can it be take it or leave it standard, right? Clearly that doesn't work. So I would say we strike a balance. And there are two principles that we use when it comes to striking this balance. The first one is we try to take a category by category approach. So I think that already eliminates some of the variances. What I mean by that is most walking tours, might have similar challenges or configuration challenges versus an attraction ticket. And then the second one is we try to strike a balance between operational feasibility for operators, as well as what we just know to be conversion or trust drivers for customers. So this is all very abstract. I give you a very concrete example. 13, 14 years ago when we started, and you guys might remember this, but a common feature was whether an activity is on demand or free sale. Basically, if I book it, is it instantly confirmed, or do I have to wait 2-3 days for the operator to confirm it? What we said is, yes, we could now just give everybody the option, what they pick, which is actually what we did for the first 2 years. But very quickly, we just said, no, we want to change the default. The default now must be free sale, which means it's instantly confirmed, because that's just what customers are looking for. And of course, that increased the conversion rate. Another example of where we changed the default is on supplier cancellation. So it used to be that anybody can set any cancellation policy, but we now set the default to 24 hours because that again massively increased conversion rate, which means it made the pie much bigger for everyone. So more people are booking experiences. Now, at the same time, of course, we recognize that for some very private tours, or for some multi-day tours, or for some activities that have a very high capital expenditure. I mean, for example, a Broadway show, that it cannot be canceled, right, 24 hours in advance. So we do allow for some of these exceptions, but we also see our role to sometimes try to communicate and help the supply community understand that some things that may immediately look like it's not in my interest from an operator point of view is actually in the interest of the broader operator community, because it overall makes the industry more attractive and overall more customers to book it. So I think, that's kind of the balance we try to strike. And at the same time, look, we always get tons of feedback, right? From, we're very close to operators. I talk to them regularly. We have local sales teams that talk to them regularly. So, when we sometimes go overboard, we also, retract and take a step back again.
Let's just take a step back, actually, and zoom out a little bit to sort of this general discussion that the industry has around online travel agencies, OTAs, marketplaces. It seems to inspire some of the most fervent, vocal proponents and opponents in our community, and it's a funny thing because we have operators who have built their entire businesses off of working with distribution partners, because for them they say it's a lot easier than managing their own marketing and support channels and everything else. And then we have others who have sworn them off forever. What's your position on this polarization or these strong opinions that OTAs seem to have in our industry?
So first of all, I think strong opinions, we welcome them, right? The way I look at it is usually there's a grain of truth in, so call it OTA criticism. There's always something we can learn from. Do they have a valid point? Is this something we can do better? Generally, I would say there's no way you can make everyone happy, right? I think in a way, we're very much focused on I think driving the industry forward. I do believe that we have a role to play to make the overall cake bigger and really increase awareness for booking experiences, right? So whenever we run an ad on TV saying you should book your experiences, even if they don't book with us, we like to think that it overall increases the awareness for the industry. Likewise, when competitors run TV ads to book experiences, right, same thing, helps overall the industry and helps the overall awareness. And then I think some of the polarization, frankly, may have to do with the fact that some operators work better direct, and that's totally fine, right? We're not for everyone. All I can say is the operators we do work with, and that we do work successfully, are very happy. Our value proposition to operators is that if you choose to work with us, we want to grow your bookings, right? And we want to help simplify your growth journey, in this digital age, reaching customers around the world. So, we try to bring our value propositions to the table. So, I would say usually when we also have, I've had a lot of these OTA debates, when we get to the details of it, then I think the answers can be quite nuanced. And just give you maybe, this in the sake of transparency, to give you two very concrete examples of where this OTA polarization may come into play. One of them is commission rates, right? So why do I pay commission rates when I can just pay no commission on direct bookings? And typically the way I like to think about it is that commission rate is the cost of marketing, right? So I always like to say that for any operator, your potential audience is the entire world, right? So if you run a river cruise in London, anybody who comes to London, which is Chinese travelers, French travelers, whatever travelers, that's your potential audience. It's very difficult for all operators. For some, it's possible, but for most operators, it's impossible to market to the entire world, right? And so that's a role we play. And so I would, when it comes to thinking about commission or those things, I think it's important to look at the total cost of what it will cost to do direct marketing and then compare that against that. And ultimately, if people find that they can be more successful through other channels, then I think that's a business decision to take, right? So I think these are just some examples of where it's important to go into very specifically of that. And I would say usually when I talk to individual operators, especially one-on-one, this polarization is a little bit less radical than, let's say in a panel discussion or some online forums.
Again, sticking with zooming out here, if we look at experienced marketplaces like yourself and some of your competitors, Viator, some of the smaller ones, and then compare against OTAs and flights and hotels, and we look at how they've scaled versus experience scaling. I mean, Booking has 70% of the independent hotel market in Europe, whereas if you combine all the OTAs together in the experiences market, it's still not past the 10% level. Why is it that experience OTAs has proved so difficult compared with flights and hotels?
So I would slightly disagree. So I don't think it's proven more difficult. I think we're just 20 years behind hotels, right? So if you think about when Expedia or Booking, all these other guys started, it was just way before. So when we started, Get Your Guide, Booking.com was already a giant, right? Expedia was, the world's #1 travel company. And so I think we just started much later. And if you, and we've done this, when you overlay the growth of both our industry and of the OTAs, is actually following the trajectory of a lot of these other industries. For example, one of the criticisms or objections we sometimes hear is like, well, loyalty is just much lower in experience market. When we look at our numbers, the majority of our sales in the last 2 years came from repeat customers, right? And when we track the growth rates that we have, very, very similar to that of in the accommodation spaces. So I would say overall, we just started later, and that's why it looks relatively smaller, but the journey is very much the same. Because and I would even say that in experiences, the role of marketplaces or platforms like us have an even bigger role to play, because when you think about hotels, you have much more known brands in hotels. When you think about airlines, it's much bigger brands in airline direct versus in experiences, while you do have some brands. The majority of operators do not have brands, so we can actually create that brand trust for customers to then book experiences. So I would say the role of marketplaces like GetYourGuide have, the value we can add can be even bigger. And so I would say that certainly marketplaces are here to stay.
One of the things we spend a lot of time on with tour operators, teaching and coaching, is on how to create experiences at the right price, and a price that is delivering value both for the customer and both for the supplier as well. How do you think about prices on a marketplace where the customer just doesn't drop on to Get Your Guide or Viator? They've been on a million other marketplaces in their daily life, Amazon being the main one, where everything's price. Yet we're spending all our time trying to create value rather than focus on price, whereas a marketplace screen leans towards price. How would you say to operators what they think about price on a marketplace?
That's a great question. My advice would be, it depends a little bit on the category. So if it's if you're an attraction ticket, I think price matters. In a lot of the more tours, experiential categories, from everything I've seen from our data, price matters, as in customers don't want to be ripped off. So what we see in our data is when you book, where customers get ticked off is when they book on Get Your Guide and they find it was more expensive than if they booked direct. So it's rather you feeling ripped off that you paid a higher price, but the actual price itself doesn't matter so much, right? And the reason is that, frankly, it's much more important what you book. So to give you a very concrete example, I'm going to Tokyo in 2 months, and I'm comparing booking an attraction ticket versus booking a tour, and they're 3 times the price difference. So I'm rather thinking, and you would, as the tour that's 3 times more expensive, no matter how much you lower it, you will never match the price of the attraction ticket. And so the thing you can focus on as the tour is what's, to my earlier point, which is what is the IP, what is the core experience that you're offering that is potentially differentiated and that would create an unforgettable experience. And then how good is the quality? And then, of course, is it available? So long story short, price is important, but I would say in many ways it's more of a hygiene factor than the true driver of customer decisions in most categories. So that's why I hate to generalize, because when it comes to attraction tickets, when it comes to one of the ticket types of inventory, price matters quite a bit. But when it comes to tours, just even as customers ourselves, if you see a wine tour, Napa Valley wine trip, $60, and another Napa Valley wine trip $17, but one is 4.9 and the other is 4.7. I mean, I will not care about the $10 difference if I'm guaranteed to have a better day trip to the Napa Valley, because I'm only going to be in Napa Valley once in my life, right? And I've heard all about Napa Valley. I've seen Sideways. I'm a big fan of, big Cab Sav wines. This $10 will not make the difference.
When you look at sort of this landscape of different offerings within your store, within your marketplace. It's really interesting to see the way Viator, Klook, Airbnb experiences. You have all really tried to solve this kind of incoherence, which is that a customer both wants to book these sort of more commodified offerings like an attraction ticket, where price is really important, and actually where you as a marketplace sell a huge volume, versus also them wanting these unforgettable hidden gem experiences that are incredibly hard to scale and manage. And I look at Airbnb experiences and they've floundered for years. I'm still optimistic that they'll get their act together, but they've really tried to lead into, we're only going to do the most unique and unforgettable. They've gone very far in that extreme, versus something like a Hideout that has really gone in the other extreme and said, let's, to me anyway, let's commodify everything, even the tours. So how do you think about the awkwardness of this kind of conflict within the customer themselves, that you as a marketplace need to balance the unforgettable and also the stuff that sells well? And you want to sell both and you want to present both, but there's, I don't know, do you see a tension there?
I definitely see a tension. The way we approach it, I think goes back to what I mentioned earlier on discovery. I think from a selection point of view, you got to have both, right? So you need both the. I wouldn't. By the way, I wouldn't say that a regular ticket to the Eiffel Tower isn't unforgettable, right? So I think that's. I feel like sometimes when marketplaces make these judgments, they, well, as the name implies, they make a judgment on what is unforgettable and what is not. And I think that fundamentally is takes you yourself too important. As in, this is, in my opinion, in Tao's opinion, unforgettable, and this is not, right? I don't think that's the right way to put it. I know plenty of people have been dreaming of seeing the Eiffel Tower for years, and this is the highlight of their trip, right? So I think what we're trying to do is, we try to have an open but curated marketplace in the sense of that everything needs to pass a certain quality bar, right? So everything needs to be high confidence activity. But whether it's like more niche-y or less niche-y, we just want to make sure we have the best possible discovery and search experience on Get Your Guide so that you can find the matching thing for you, right? I don't think that upfront saying we only do the super commoditized experience, we'll only do the niche experience, that's just an incomplete experience, right? So, because the reality is, even I myself, when, I consider myself a very well-traveled person, I know places quite well. If I'm going to, San Francisco for the first time, I'm going to do the mainstream stuff, and I'm going to do some of the more niche things that cater to my particular passions. So I think long story short is, as a marketplace, we want to be open but curated and have the entire selection of things people are interested in, and then create the best possible search experience on top to help match the right experience to you.
Yeah, I suppose my question really comes from doing web searches, for example, in which I say hidden gem Paris tours, and I get redirected to an OTA website that is selling me a boat cruise. One of the most sort of commodified things. You're right. It's a good point about the unforgettable, but it does also speak to kind of how you're curating your marketplace, like what you're offering, what's on sale, and it's a hard balance to strike. And you look at you look at certain marketplaces, and it's just 30,000 of the same versions of a Colosseum Rome walking tour or whatever it may be. Your roots, obviously, like probably anybody's roots, are quite curated as any startup goes, and then you've got to scale. So can you walk us through not only what your thinking has been around curation versus breadth of supply, but I also know that you're maybe shifting gears a little bit now.
Yeah, totally. And look, I think this challenge just upfront is definitely points to one of the more unique challenges to building a service marketplace, right? Because that's what experiences are. It's fundamentally services, and as a type of product, it's much more fungible than e-commerce products. And as you're saying, we've definitely evolved our curation approach. I would say we were probably, well, not probably, but certainly the first truly open but curated marketplace already from the get-go. As in, we created the, I sound very old now, but 15 years ago, we created the first extranet, right? Where people can self-upload inventory, and then we would have a quality process to verify, to check, and then bring you online. So in a way, it was already open, as in anybody could try, but then we would not put everything online. And that has been the roots of GetYourGuide, which is open but curated. And then I take you back to more recent history, which is last 4 years, right? So obviously we had COVID, then 2020, 2022, nothing came online because basically more stuff came offline. And the decision between 2023 and 24, for us, the mood was very much about bringing tourism back, expand the industry. And I would say there we tipped the balance a little bit too much towards open, as in we let everything in and brought everything online. So that actually went even against our own roots of being open but curated. And so what we've done recently is to bring the balance back a little bit, which is to say, hey, anybody's still open to, apply and think about putting something online on GetYourGuide. But, we would verify a couple of things first before we put it online. So I would say that has been our approach. And this also, points to one of the things you said earlier around, do you need, the 100, Vatican or Colosseum tours? And also based on a lot of, feedback from operators, the answer is probably no, right? So, a couple of the principles that we're thinking about, curation is, first of all, are you a verified supplier? Do you, is it a compliance? Is it a country that's allowed? Does it align with some of our responsible tourism guidelines and so on? The other one is then, are you offering an activity where we already have, 50 of the same, right? Because if you offer the 51st of the very same activity, it helps neither the customer, nor does it help you because you're unlikely to get bookings from us. Right. And so those are just some of the corrections we've done recently to tip the balance, still open, but moving it a little bit more towards curated and going back to our roots.
What does that mean for current suppliers? Are you removing supply? Are you on a sort of long-term journey of doing this, or is this going to happen quickly? Talk to us about the practicalities of this correction.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are two immediate things we've done. So one is when you upload an inventory, it's not instantly live anymore. So we would do a couple checks first. Being a tech company, there's still a lot of automation steps, and we try to move it quickly. But first, you undergo a check. We check for a couple of things like compliance and fraud, quality. Do we already have a lot of this activity? So those are a couple of checks that we're doing. We may return to an instant live in the future, but only when we get the automation steps there. That's one. So all new activities that go live are first checked, go through a waitlist, and we really make sure that we have confidence in every single activity that goes live on GetYourGuide. The second piece is we're doing a bulk review of a lot of activities, especially the ones that haven't had a booking in a very, very long time. So where, as we all know, working experiences, itineraries change, availabilities change, prices change. And if you haven't had a booking in a year or two, then it's, very likely that a lot of the information is outdated. So we're putting a lot of these activities in bulk under review, and then may decide to put some of them back online or leave some of them to remain offline.
With some of these changes that you're doing, you're obviously when you're shifting back to the more sort of curated aspect, and obviously you're seeing that this is going to help increase conversions. So how do you see that side of it playing out? And from the supplier or operator standpoint, how should they start preparing for the tours and experiences they may upload or already have on there as supply currently?
Yeah, first of all, it should help conversion, but more importantly, it should pay into our value proposition of trust. The litmus test that I always, tell our folks internally is that, we should be in a place where we can, with confidence, recommend every single piece of activity of inventory on GetYourGuide to our friends and family, right? That's the state where we need to be, because we take the responsibility of our service marketplace quite seriously, right? It's not like eBay where you can just throw stuff over the fence and let's see if it works, right? And so I think we take that quite seriously. In terms of how suppliers can prepare, I think continue to work with us if you upload inventory to follow along with some of the steps, right? So the way I look at it is, it may at first for an operator seem like cumbersome right, to jump through a couple more hoops, upload your company registration. We have introduced a KYC check, as in, are you truly the person who you're saying you are? But the way I would put it is, as we raise the bar, you as an operator will be in much better company among other verified operators. And so this actually came from, and this step, by the way, also came from some feedback. So early this year, we had a bigger event at our headquarters. We're invited some of our biggest operators to come. And one major point of contention and feedback they gave us was precisely that there were not that there was competition, right? Of course, people don't love competition, but it's something you deal with, and the strong operators view it as a way to get even stronger. But what a lot of them did complain about is that you had operators who were fraudulent, or maybe call it not entirely fraudulent, but operating in the gray area. And so what we're trying to do is to really say that, hey, look, we take the feedback very seriously, and we want all operators who are on GetYourGuide to be verified and following along with the rules. And we do this check up front, and not in the course of the business, to make sure that everything that's on GetYourGuide is really high quality.
So what I'm hearing from here, this is basically a house cleaning of existing supply, stuff that's not selling, getting removed. You want to bring new supply on. So an action point here for suppliers, for operators, they need to get their thinking heads on and start designing new product. Would you agree with that?
I would say, I mean, so that is, I think, is a separate point. Like, creating new products is a separate point. I would say just the immediate first step is like, work with us. So those operators that already work with us, I encourage all of you, just work with us and, help us in the verification process that we get this done with, to really raise the bar of quality on the marketplace. I think that's one. If you're not yet working with us and we ask you for a lot of information as you upload inventory, bear with us and recognize that this is in the pursuit of overall raising the quality of our curation. And for both existing and new operators, in order to grow your bookings, there for sure, I always encourage innovation and thinking about creating new types of experiences. Now, what I wouldn't encourage is, and what has happened a lot over the last couple of years is, let's say we have a very popular type of tour, let's say a Vatican tour, a Colosseum tour. And then what happened a lot is like, hey, I as an operator see that, there's like 10, 20 really successful tours of that sort. I'm going to create the same thing. And the reality is that is not going to be a path to success. By the way, it never was a path to success, because, if we have 100 Colosseum tours, frankly, 85 of them will not even get many bookings. So it was already never a path to success. And now we're even limiting that further, because we don't think it's particularly valuable for the marketplace to have 100, 200, I don't know, 1,000 of the same tour. So to be successful, and this goes into a broader message, I would encourage all operators to think about what is a unique way to experience your destination that you have very high conviction in, that, taps into a deeper passion of the customers. Now, that passion can be, some version of a, type of hobby, type of interest. Like I mentioned, the chicken hot pot chankanabe experience in Japan, which taps into history and the storytelling. Look, I don't know what will work on GetYourGuide, frankly, because that's, the power of innovation. Like, if I could predict what will work, we would just create tours ourselves. But the reality is, we cannot predict what will work, right? But I can definitely tell what will not work, and that's the type of stuff and type of inventory that we try to, filter out up front in the curation effort.
Beyond the sort of, I guess, quote unquote, low performing, no booking kinds of tours, or tours that are operating in gray areas, are there other categories or kinds of operators that should be aware or on notice of sort of this process that's happening right now?
I think if you're trying to join GetYourGuide, one macro area to point out, just not even try, is if you're operating in a category that we don't play in. And what I mean by that is, internally we like to say that, just because GetYourGuide is multi-category doesn't mean that anything goes. So before the efforts to increase our curation, we used to have all kinds of stuff on the platform, and I deliberately use the word stuff like, we had tons of eSIMs, right? And, that's not the reason you come to Get Your Guide when you think about booking unforgettable experiences, and then you come to a landing page and you see 100 eSIMs, right? And then and then basically the interesting experiences are then lost in the crowd. So, if you operate in some of these categories that we simply don't play in, then, I encourage you, to find other ways of distribution. So we're definitely also being much clearer on saying yes or no to certain categories of products.
Early on in the conversation, you brought up IP and the importance of thinking about what exactly is protectable on your tours. We once in a while amongst our memberships will have somebody wake up and say, "I can't believe it. One of my guides just copied my tour and put it on an OTA and paid for a bunch of reviews, and now is up in business and they're exactly my tour." And to me, that dovetails with this sort of idea of what is unique and unforgettable. And it, from a design perspective, it partially speaks to what can you protect, and it might be that special relationship with the chicken hot pot purveyor. But how are you thinking about the sort of IP protections overall in the scope of your inventory? This sense that business sometimes is conflictual with copying things that are copyable. Where do you fall on that kind of like lane of protecting your suppliers from some of these things?
Yeah, great question. So I think that journey you just listed, somebody who worked for someone, tour guide, creates similar product and so on. I think there's one step, for example, in the chain of events you listed that we will try to combat is actually the fake reviews, right? And that actually already points to a way to protect it, which is your reviews. Right. Ultimately, let's say there are two identical experiences. Like we're not saying we won't have any identical. So there will always be similar experiences. We just don't want to have 1,000 of them. Which is two identical experiences. And then the question is, which one has better reviews, right? So a great way really to protect your experiences is the quality, right? Every customer who leaves a 5-star review is another vote of confidence. And if I'm as a customer compare these two experiences, I would likely choose the one that has better reviews. Another one is also, for example, nuances of maybe catering slightly to a different type of audience, right? Maybe a younger, maybe an older, maybe a certain demographic. Maybe I offer my tours in Spanish because, I'm trying to tap into the Spanish market. I do think there are ways to ultimately differentiate, but in competition, I mean, in a way, that's the blessing and a curse. Competition is always open for anyone. Some of the most successful operators today are new, right? Are the ones that were created in the last 5 years or the last 10 years, so did not exist. So I think, there is no one antidote to competition. I think that's always going to be, it's the part of business. So I would just encourage operators to think about one way is to create new IP. One way is to protect it with, a great quality, which gets immortalized in customer reviews. One way is to create more availability than the competition, right? So can I hire more high quality tour guides? Frankly, when I talk to some of our best operators, their edge is the ability to hire more high quality tour guides, right? Because this guarantees high quality and availability. Another edge could be maybe I run my business in a leaner way so that I can, for everything, for the same quality and the same availability, offer a lower price, right? So I think these are all dimensions of a competition that is multifaceted and that all will help to grow your business ultimately.
So let's jump forward and have a bit of a look at the future. There isn't a travel podcast in existence today that doesn't mention AI. Get Your Guide mentioned AI in the last funding round. So a couple of questions on it. How are you using it internally to help Get Your Guide, but also help your customer and the supply? And how do you see the threats AI has to the discovery and booking for a customer? Threats or opportunities, whatever way you want to frame it.
Yeah, I generally see AI as very much an opportunity, both for the industry and for us and for the customers. There's a couple of things we use it for. Customers, it's pretty clear that you can use it in the discovery, right? So better matching inventory to, better matching the experiences to the traveler. So what am I looking for? Am I getting recommended the right things? Can I use AI to refine my queries? So, all the things that you can see with, the agentic AIs, ChatGPT, and so on, that type of interfaces, you can imagine also Marketplace to adapt more and more based on what works. So overall, helping customers find the right thing, AI will be super helpful. And by the way, we've been using AI, and it's a buzzword, but we've had a machine learning team for more than 10 years. So as a marketplace, you always have data product teams working on ranking and recommendations. So that's an area we're quite familiar with. The second piece is definitely on productivity. So you can use AI for, translating customer care contacts. You can use AI to translate content into 40 plus languages much more quickly and at a lower cost. So definitely for productivity. And then for the supply side, that's actually, for me, I'm a little bit biased because I work a lot on supply, probably the most exciting area. So already early this year, or last year, sorry, 25 already, I forget. We launched this AI content creator, right, which helps operators just dump their website content, and we structure it in a way that we think is the most compelling structured content to help drive conversion rates. So that AI content creator is just one way, and I would expect this line of products to evolve. Plus, AI, I think, can drive a lot of insights. So the topic we talked about earlier of like, how can I grow my bookings, right? That's really the number one question for all operators. And I think AI can help, such as, the question is like, how can I be more competitive? Is it price? Is it availability? Is it quality? Is it cutoff times? Is it my cancellation rates? Is it the comments people leave in the reviews? Is it the IP? Is it some inclusion, right? AI will, because frankly, we have, you mentioned the number earlier, hundreds of thousands of activities on Get Your Guide. We will not be able for every account manager to by hand tell you exactly what to do, but AI will be able to give you much better and actionable insights on how to be more competitive and differentiate your offerings ultimately on Get Your Guide. And that's where I see really the biggest opportunity.
There's a common complaint that we see, though, which is somebody wakes up and they see that their entire tour has been changed by AI, by somebody within an organization, and it is actually spewing falsehoods about the tour. Does Get Your Guide do that, or how are you looking at QC for that?
Yeah, so not saying that errors happen. By the way, they also happen with human editing. And I think the key thing here is really about feedback loops, and we definitely have processes in place, and we're continuously optimizing the processes in order to reduce the error rate, because we would never, it's not in our interest to have hallucinated content, because that just comes back in customer complaints, which hurts customer trust. So it is very much in our interest to make the content trustworthy and true, while at the same time highlighting the reasons customers should book it, which is then aligned with the interests of the operator to increase the attractiveness of it.
One last one on AI. Do you see any future of Get Your Guide working with AI guides, or are you going to stay 100% human guided?
So never make predictions about the future, because they're usually not true. I definitely think there is a path of some version of a hybrid, because and I take you back a little bit. There was the question that people had during COVID, when you couldn't book experiences, whether we shouldn't just do virtual tours, right? You cannot visit Venice, so why don't you just do video tours of Venice? And we just said, like, look, that's just because it has the name tours in it, it's a fundamentally different business. We're in the business of connecting people with real places and real cultures and taste and smell and touch. So we're in that business. Now, if there's a way to combine AI and some kind of digital content with that, we're always going to innovate. But there was always going to be the in-person, the have a sense of place type of activity where you're in Rome, where you're in Istanbul. So I think that's going to be the future. But for sure, there's going to be augmentation with AI. So I can definitely imagine, things like, today you're booking a, entrance ticket to, Sagrada Familia, maybe with an audio guide. In the future, I can imagine, that audio guide being augmented with AI and personalized. So I think AI can definitely be helpful in augmenting it, but it will never replace the Sagrada Familia or the history architect, guide who just brings the passion and can interact with you. Because ultimately, as humans, I think that's also what we're looking for, right? We want that interaction.
as we approach the end of our hour, this has really been fascinating, but we brought up the unforgettable, the memorable, the future of travel is guided. I really do like that slogan of yours. And as a former guide myself, and I do see that in our sort of industry, there is a large part of unforgettable travel experiences that a lot of the marketplaces haven't tapped yet. And that's the experiences that aren't 3 or 6 hours long, but 6 days, 12 days long, the multi-day journey. And I was just wondering what's on your mind, if you can share anything about multi-day tours and like the future of your marketplace.
Yeah, so super interesting space, and it really points to I would call it really the opportunity in the broader travel experiences space because it is so multi-category. As mentioned in the example earlier, that we want to make sure that we tackle every category right. So we don't just want to throw stuff on the platform and see if it sticks, but if we want to tackle a category, we want to do it properly. So if you think about Multiday, for example, there's a lot of feature sets that are very different than booking, single day trips or attraction tickets. I would say, watch this space. It's definitely an area where even a lot of our day trip operators are innovating into. So, I mentioned Desert Safari earlier. Some of our partners are starting to think about 2-3 day trips or even longer ones. So I would say watch this space and hopefully some exciting things to announce soon.
Yeah, fantastic. One thing I've always been curious of, because multi-day, as you sort of just touched on there, is very different from day tours. It's the purchase journey tends to be a lot longer. It tends to be heavily reliant on storytelling and email campaigns, and even more heavily reliant on meta ads. And we all know that you guys do a lot of stuff with Google ads, but it tends to be more meta ads driven as well. So how do you see that fitting in with Get Your Guide as a platform as a whole?
Yeah, I think you're addressing definitely some of the unique challenges. The way I would put it is every category has the points of differentiation that matter. So, for example, in multi-day, a big one is the type of accommodation. So, am I staying in a 3-star or am I staying in a tent? So I would say that's definitely how we think about it, which is as we tackle every category, what truly matters for the customer decision, and what in the booking flow is unique. So, for example, another thing in multi-day is some of these really long multi-days require upfront payment, and requires a change in payment flow also to the operators. Because, our typical payment flow is that we pay operators, basically a couple days after the tour is over. That is not going to fly in a, I don't know, multi-day, very expensive, high cash flow intensive product for the operator. So all I'm saying is these are the topics we're definitely thinking about, and designing both the supply and the consumer product to make it right.
Your Originals brand has sort of been on a journey. It's sort of transformed a couple of times over the years as you've thought about it. But when I look to Get Your Guide, when I look to the platform, we've been leading product optimization clinics, both online and in person. We've been looking at a lot of listings, and I really do feel like those Originals listings are speaking often to kind of the core of what you've been saying about what is memorable, what is unforgettable. I'm just wondering if we could leave on sort of a high and helping our operators in the community who oftentimes all believe they're offering unforgettable or memorable experiences. Is there some deeper, even data-driven kind of definition that we could give to the iconic kind of Get Your Guide experience that ultimately you're most looking for and is most successful on your platform?
In many ways, as an entrepreneur, you also have to know the things that you don't know or that you're not good at. And I actually much more trust the creativity of our community. And it's not a cop out, but again, I go back to this example in Japan when people were saying we're creating this experience, and I was like, wow, why did I come up with that? So I can only give the broad parameters that I know based on data works really well in Get Your Guide, and it goes back to unique IP, so a unique way to experience a city that maybe others haven't thought of, or with a twist that's more relevant. To higher quality, right? So I have a lot of examples. Frankly, when we started Get Your Guide, I still remember this, and we operated in Rome, obviously, as you have to, and there were a lot of tour suppliers, and we kept getting 3-star, 2-star, 3-star reviews. And the biggest innovation some of these other operators took is they just had 5-star reviews. And so quality sounds like an obvious differentiator, but to deliver, and your listeners will know this the best, to deliver consistent high quality at scale. So not just the owner running the tours is going to be great, but teaching, educating, recruiting all the guides, that's hard. So that's the point of differentiation. Availability in the time slots where customers need them, with a short cutoff time, low cancellation rates, at a fair price. I mean, this all sounds easy, but as your listeners know, it's not. So doing all these things right is super hard. So it's fundamentally these basics, I do think. And then there's going to be the creativity spark that I even don't know. So I keep getting surprised by the creativity people have in creating new experiences, and I'm just super excited about what's yet to come and what new experiences we can talk about next time I come on your podcast.
We have gone on quite the multi-day journey in just the last 59 minutes. And Tao Tao, we appreciate your candor, your ability to sort of speak to all of these different issues and come on and address everything with our community. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you for the great job you're doing, and hope I get invited back at some point in the future.